Okay, hi guys, welcome back to episode 15, I think, for Formatables Refactor. So I have now kind of reached a conclusion of the best way to use these videos. I find that quite good to get me going, but then when it gets to the sort of the bits that require more concentration, sadly it's not so easy to do that while recording. So what we've been doing for the last couple of videos without really noticing is we tend to just do the thinking of what we're going to do whilst we're recording and maybe begin the activity, and then once we get into the part that requires concentration we then tend to stop the video and just do the work. And so what we did last time is we did all the analysis regarding the two transforms that we were struggling with, the ODB transform and the build files transform, and then while you guys were away I did all the code to implement it, which was, we just have a quick look here. Still a fair number of commits. I don't know why the Windows build failed, but everything else looks alright, so probably just timeout. So as you can see here, we finally managed to get rid of the locator and formatables. We had a number of things that came from trying to remove that we had to address. We had to deal with a few problems with templates, but then by the end of it we managed to one by one get rid of each of the transforms, as you can see here, and that all worked quite nicely. So the code generator at present is got no notion of technical space specific locator. I mean, of course you must bear in mind that this was a bit of a cosmetic exercise in a way, because all we've done is we moved the complications that we had over to a couple of to one specific transform, if I'm honest, which is the legacy paths transform. Now you may say, oh well, why so much trouble to just for a cosmetic thing? But actually it makes a lot of sense, because now if you think about it, we've encoded all of the knowledge related to locations of artifacts in a technical space dependent way into this transform. And what we'll do is we will just basically run side by side this transform against this transform. This is data driven, this is hard coded. And all we need to do is to make sure that this transform provides a replacement for that transform. So it's very painful to have to do this, but the positive side of it is that we can get on with the refactor, make everything look like they should, approximate as much as possible to the end result, without having to worry about all of this legacy stuff that we're carrying, which is really kind of the cognitive load is very high. So it makes it really difficult to think, because we have so many things here that are just legacy. Like for example, we have all these terminologies that are no longer used because we now know how to call things properly. We have all these classes that don't make any sense, and then on top of that we have technical space specific sort of processing that doesn't really fit the pattern that we want to put in. So basically, following the usual best to confuse one problem at a time, we are trying to do this in steps, in small incremental steps, because it's just too much of a jump to move straight away to a data-driven model of the world. So the first 14 videos, I guess, were all about getting rid of the locator, which we achieved. Now we've got the rest of the formatables namespace to contend with. So there's two ways you can go about this. Excuse me. And the way number one is to look just at the helpers first. And we could probably do that. That will get us a good bang for the buck. Or way number two is to look at everything other than helpers, and that would also give us a good bang for the buck, because as you can see here, there's a lot of little tiny things here that need looking at. I'm hoping that the remainder of this exercise is actually going to be quite trivial, because these things here are not quite as complicated as the locator. It doesn't require quite as much breaking of the conceptual model as the locator did. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to look at one entity at a time, and we are going to try to move them across as we go along. So for instance, we take the Facet Properties, we're going to see where that's used. Some of them hopefully may not even be used at all, which makes our life much easier. Some of them may be already available somewhere else. For example, Facet Properties to me sounds as if something like the Metamodel Properties, may already have some of these things. I mean, we have Facet Properties here, there's enabled, and there's the directory name. Seems to me that's a good candidate. So what we're going to do then is, I think we'll start with that then. Let's just open up our, sorry, pressing buttons randomly here. Let's just open up our clock, and we are also fast approaching the end of this sprint, so probably by Sunday we'll finish it next couple of days. So I think we probably will close this story because we haven't had any overhead of creating videos. It's been pretty simple, so it's fine. Right, I think we could probably... So the problem with this story is that we moved over to the legacy thing, and we're definitely not going to tackle this story right now. So I think I'm just going to postpone this story some other time. Yeah, and similarly, I don't think we should touch anything to do with the data-driven stuff this sprint. We just have to finish the formatter, and I think that's kind of all we need to do here. So let's then say move formatable. Let's move standalone perhaps. Formatable types to physical and logical models, and if we start it, sadly it's too big. We call it formatables, I guess. I could probably just say something like this. Try to keep this more or less the right size. Now then, so it probably started clocking at maybe around, so started working about around 11 o'clock. Move of the assorted types which are not related to helpers to their final location. Right, then probably keep track of the types. Will make our life slightly easier. So let's start with Facet Properties. So first question we'll ask is, what happens if we remove Facet Properties? As you can see here, the directory name and enabled should all be populated, so I don't think this is a very big problem. This could be a quick win, and we could do with some quick wins, to be honest. So we just have to make sure we got latest of everything. Convert dogen.text.cpp.dia.json. Convert dogen.text, and then if we indent it. Right, so what this will give us, hopefully, quite a lot of changes here. Well, we changed the model. We deleted Facet Properties. Yeah, all makes sense with the exception of this guy here. We'll leave that one for later. Righty, so if we attempt to run some tests here, this will break. Now let's see what it breaks. Breaks an adapter, okay. This adapter is to be decommissioned anyway, so let's see. Facet Properties, so see, as you can see here, all we're doing is copying across the Facet Properties. So it's clearly telling us that we should be alright with this change. problems in assistant. Right, what I'd like to know is who is actually using this facet property. So if I just look at the assistant, see, right, here we are. So we're obtaining the facet properties and then determining a few things out of it. Okay, this looks easy enough. So I think all we need to do is just go back to the assistant, and then it probably don't seem to be. Now let's have a quick look. Do we have the Metamodel Properties anywhere? We have a stream, filtering stream, have an element, a context. Context. Physical name, artifact. Now the facet properties presumably were being obtained from the model. Oh, because this is a Formatables model presumably. Let's have a quick look what this context is saying. This is presumably a Formatables context. No, actually, of course, it's not going to be a Formatables context. It's going to be transform context, which would be this guy here. Right, so this context here. So the context has things like enable archetype for elements, element properties, and the Formatables model, plus helpers and a tracer. Okay, this is a very legacy context. Let's have a look at how context work these days. First they're generated. Ours can't be because we have the helpers, and that's just a whole other level of pain. But where we're trying to get to is we don't really. What do we want? We want the physical model presumably. Because if we compare, say, the logical context, that has a physical metamodel. But mind you, not a physical model, as you'd expect. The text context probably has a physical metamodel too. But then, of course, the text model contains the logical and the physical model, which is cool. Now, the problem we have really is that we don't really, we are trying very hard to get rid of this Formatables model. It shouldn't really exist. So I guess one way to think of this is that perhaps the context should be the physical, the logical physical model, really. The text model, in other words, as we call it at the moment. Though it is a bit annoying that we need to have a whole model. Why do we need the whole model? So if you imagine, the whole role of the context is, as you are processing, as you are running these different model to text transforms, you may need some bits of information that are not specific to the elements that you're processing. And by element, really, I mean the logical physical element. So both the logical logical dimension of the element, as well as the physical dimension. So that makes sense. However, it is a bit annoying that we're now going through the entire model. That's not very encapsulated. We should be transforming a single element. So this seems to me like a modeling problem. Now, if the problem is just purely to do with facets, we could potentially just obtain what we need. So what we're going to do is, let's have a quick look at how model is being used. So we need qualified namespaces. All of that is available now via the provenance, and that is it, in fact. So this very big dependency we have in the Formatables model is actually quite trivial. We could just get rid of it because the element contains all the information we need. So okay, so let's do that. The second thing we can do as well is to say, well, how much do we use the context? So see here we need the enable archetypes for element. What else do we do? The element properties. Right, the element properties sadly we can't get away with, because the element properties is a very, very deep formatable thing. As you can imagine, this guy here. And that we just won't be able to get away with. But what else? The Formatables model. Right, so we seem somehow to sometimes be requesting other properties. That is a very interesting thing. We wouldn't expect that to be the case. Why would you need properties for the elements? Okay, so this needs some investigation. Facet Properties, enable archetype for elements. Right, and now we get into things like the C++ standard. And so this is actually, you can see how terrible this code is. We seem to be asking for a model. Right, so a second ago we had a model, didn't we? Let's have a look at the assistant again. Right, no, sorry, we're just getting a little bit confused here. So what we're asking for is, yeah, these are model modules. Okay, so as you can see here, it's just like a concentration there. So that's not quite what we're looking for. So there's a lot of enablement queries here. You just need to see how much of a dependency you have in the model. Facet Properties, C++ standard, okay, we can't get away with that yet. String properties, so it's not too bad really. All in all, we need to locate the element properties. Now we can't do anything about that because that literally means moving the whole of Formatables. And the Facet Properties, which we probably can get away with. And the C++ standard, which we will do in the future, the string properties. So that is all the dependencies we have in the Formatables model. So it's not huge. So what we'll do is, we will change the context to have, so let's think about the right thing to do here. Do we need the entirety of the physical model? Seems a bit much, doesn't it? Because at the end of the day, it's not like when we're processing a given artifact, we need visibility of other artifacts. In reality, almost always, all we care about is the Metamodel properties. In other words, if we've made some changes and configuration changes to the metamodel, we need to see them. And the Metamodel properties happen to also include the archetype properties, which contain the enablement. However, this is not really true enablement. Oh yes, but we don't really need the enablement at the archetype level. We need the enablement at the facet level anyway. So that I think is fine. Yeah, I think we're okay, because all of that is just used to compute enablement, so I think we're good. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just put the Metamodel properties in the context, I think. And that should take us there, I think. So, what we need to do then is we need to ZI remove facet properties. Right, so we just stash away the changes that we've done over there. To be fair, we probably want to include that too. And then what we'll do is we'll just say cosmetic changes to logical population transform. Okay, that's not a problem. And now, the first thing we need to do is to operate in the context. So the way we'll do that is we just need to have a quick look at what we got in transforms. This is a manual context, so it's not going to be the prettiest. That's not too bad actually. But so in here, we just need a reference here to let's see, Dogen dot physical perhaps, and that will be types, entities, Metamodel Properties. Right, this guy here. So when we create one of these guys, put this last here. So if I just say something like this, and we don't need to expose them, I don't think, so I'll just leave them here at the bottom. So the Metamodel Properties, I mean this is probably more than what we need, to be fair. The assistant will probably also go at some point, so we don't need to make it too perfect. So text.cpp, just below. Right, there we are. So we need something like this. These are the MMP. And then just before the tracer, we could just do something like this. Right, so there we are. We supply the MMPs. Interesting that we don't seem to know where. Am I in the wrong context? Yes, I am in the wrong context somehow. In fact, the best thing to do is probably to just undo the save it, yes. Discard changes. Okay, cool. So I don't know what happened there, but what we meant to say is text.cpp. This guy. Right, now it's better. And then just before the tracer, if we take that, and I think we're good to go. Now then, the Metamodel properties have been stored. Oh, actually, one thing mistake we did, we said that we didn't need to expose them, but that would be not particularly useful if we couldn't access them. So therefore, we do need some kind of getter. But just below the tracer, not there. So we need something like this, of course. No, this is, as I usually say this, but I have to say it again. A lot of this code doesn't look particularly brilliant. We are exploring a problem domain. Hopefully, as you can see with a lot of the models, once they start converging to some kind of final destination, the code starts to improve a little bit. And that's what we're hoping is going to be the case with these transforms as well. Just an interim step that we need to go through. Right, now then, we have the Metamodel properties available here. The assistant has a context, so all I need to now do is to say, well, whenever you're talking about facet properties, I would like you to talk about physical facet properties. So in this case, it should be physical entities obtain facet properties. So give me facet name, and I shall give you facet properties, and then here same thing again, and then what you really want to do here is replace this with something like Metamodel property. Not quite. Oh, actually we got it from the context, didn't we? So context, Metamodel Properties, not Facet Properties. So very nicely encapsulated there. Then do a check, make sure we return the right thing, and away we go. Okay. Then this chap here will have directory name. See what we're doing here is very straightforward, really. Right, now then, what we've achieved with this change is we managed to re-implement the assistant without using the Facet Properties. So if we've done our job correctly, we should be able to run all the tests and nothing should break. Now remember that we've stashed away the change we had a second ago. So this still has the previous Facet Properties. We just have to be careful not to do things like change the model at the moment, because this model here is not in sync with what's in the file system. So this is going to do its thing. Com's going in on the other side. Nothing major. I have mentioned before that we have an IRC channel. I mean, Dogen is very quiet. Not many people talk. We have an IRC channel here. Not many people join. But if you want to have a chat, you can always come up to the IRC channel. Good thing about Emacs, you can do everything there. I was playing around with IRC today, got my new IRC book, and I was trying to figure out if you could get a list of users, but it doesn't seem like this command is supported. Our compilation is finished. Okay, right, here we are. So this is what we'd expect. So our workflow in transforms is now complaining that the context does not have the Metamodel properties. So is there an MMP anywhere? No. Let's create an MMP. Do we have a physical model? Sadly, we are already at the Formatables model level, so this will be a slightly trickier change. In fact, we already have this bit of a hack here for enable archetype for element, which I also think are part of the Metamodel properties, if I'm not wrong. Enabled archetype for element, they are indeed. So what we're going to do is we're just going to slowly but surely fix these problems. So let's just propagate the MMP, and if we're saying the MMP, I wonder if we really mean the entirety of the physical model. Let's see how this transform workflow is executed from here. So there shall be a physical, sorry, there's the Formatables workflow, but there should be transforms workflow, there it is. And this guy here, okay, right, so we can simplify this slightly. What we're going to do is we're going to basically say, please just give me the physical model. Right, somewhere around here. So if we just say something like Dogen include Dogen.physical entities, struggling with the completion, Dogen.physical entities dot model, .hp perhaps. We typo somewhere. Dogen.physical interesting. Oh, types. We keep forgetting types. Entities, model, .hp. That's the fastest manifesting themselves there. So what we do now is we'll say, well, we need a tracer, clearly. We need a physical model. And we don't need these guys anymore. We need a feature model. The templates directory, interestingly enough, as it happens, is available here. So let's just get rid of that as well. That now is looking a little bit more sensible. So find the apply, get rid of a whole load of crap. It's always nice when as part of your refactoring things start to look a little bit more sensible. You could probably ask why we need to go through all this rigmarole of right, so let me just concentrate for a second. So if I just say MMPs are the PM.Metamodel Properties, and then if I say that the templates directory is something like const, oh actually probably going to need the PPP, so const auto PPP equals MMP projects path properties, and then if I say const auto this guy is the PPP.template directory full path, I believe. That solves the first problem, but we actually want to supply which also makes me wonder whether, I mean, do we really need to unpack? We should probably just supply the entirety of the physical model, really. Let's just go back to that workflow again. Workflow was the name that we used to use for the chains before we knew what to call them. Right, so let's think about this. This workflow here is taking a templates directory, feature model in the configuration. So I'm wondering whether we should just propagate physical model all the way down to here, really. Because at the end of the day, we're going to have to create a context somewhere. And the context will have the MMPs. I mean, of course, you probably argue, why do you need to supply the entirety of the physical model when actually this guy is only asking you for the MMPs? Which is a valid point, really. Perhaps what we should do is just supply the MMPs, really. How are we doing for time? Half an hour into it. Right, so these design decisions are a bit arbitrary, to be honest, sometimes. I mean, clearly you should supply as little as possible. If something is not being used, you should not give it, because it just complicates things. However, what you don't want to do is you don't want to supply one thing and then 5 minutes later figure out that you're going to need some more. And if you think about it, and you also want to make sure that whatever you're doing now is going to fit in the future. So you don't have to refactor and refactor more than necessary, really. So I think I'll take the executive decision for now and just apply the entirety of the physical model, just so we don't have to worry about this for a little while. And then what we're going to do is we're going to propagate the physical model downwards, and we shall remove the need for template directory here and enabled archetype elements. So okay, so this all looks fairly sensible. Let's go to the header file. And in the header file, what we'll do is we will, well, actually we probably need to follow the same pattern as we did here. Let's say physical model. This guy here, perhaps before artifacts. And then say instead of the templates directory, we would like to supply you with a physical model. And then let's say that you are going to keep track of the physical model. And don't need the templates directory anymore. Right, so this guy is now going to keep track of the physical model. Let's just copy and paste this bit here. And then in here, we'll do the same thing. We'll say, well, we have a physical model. Let's just remember it. And now the templates directory will break. But we could simply do something like, I believe we've done already somewhere like, is it the assistants? Where did we do this? No, it would have been one of these workflows, I should think. Right, there we are. So we need to extract the templates directory. Something like this would do. And we just need to so as you can see, this kind of work, what it really requires is for you to be concentrated. You have a complete model of the code in your head, because all you try, it's like a Mikado game really, trying to change slightly here, slightly there, without breaking anything. And that's where the tricky bit is. And what we'll do is we will propagate this change yet again to the workflow. And the context. Now in the context we tried to be clever and we didn't do the physical model. I think we might just go back and update that. Because just for consistency. Remember, all this is temporary code. We don't really want this to be too pretty. We just want this to work. So what we want is the context to match whatever we are doing elsewhere. This is not what you do if this was the final destination of this code, but it is what you do if you're just trying to get from A to B. It's the bit that I want to stress here, in case you start to think that it's fine to just hack around and to expose types even when they're not used. 90% of it they're not used. Right, so yeah, so we replace this guy here. We replace that guy there. Now let's just make sure that there's nothing else here that we can derive. That there is. So this guy here can be derived. The element properties stay. In fact, I'm now gonna make a change here and say this should really be the first model. Then the Formatables model, which we're trying to get rid of. The helpers we can't do anything about, and there's the tracer. So what we'll do is we will just follow through where we had our Metamodel Properties and transform that into our physical model. So the context is just literally just remembering this guy. And we probably want to say something like now, interestingly enough, we changed the order of a few things here. So as you can see here, element properties first, followed by the model. So perhaps this should have gone here. Okay, now then if I go to the context CPP, perhaps taking physical model. And this is, I guess, where you'd understand a bit better what I mean by having to do a few of these things without the video, because as you can see, this is very slow. As it is very slow. It's slightly faster if we do this without the recording. Slightly faster, mildly faster, I guess. But the reason why it's a bit faster is, of course, because you're more focused. And when you're more focused, you make less mistakes and you load up state in your head better. So you can make alterations quicker with less errors. And that's quite crucial when you're doing a very long refactor. But everything in engineering is a trade-off. So the trade-off we have is that we find it a bit more motivating to, when we are doing the videos, it is a bit more motivating because it gets us going quicker. Instead of faffing around playing on the internet, we just get on, start the work. The downside of it is that we do the work a bit slower. Right, now then, so what are the problems we have here? Element properties first, physical model. So I don't think it's very happy with the order. I think yes, so I think we forgot to get rid of this guy. Now it's good. Okay, now then, so right, oops. Let's make sure, oh, we're still having problems here. Well, it seems like our context is not correct. Let's have a look. So we have element properties. Let's see first the error. Seems that we are not defining the constructor correctly. So element properties, physical model, formatables model, helpers. You can see quite clearly here what I mean by concentration. Now then, we can simplify all of this stuff yet again. Just say that we need a physical model. Don't need this guy. Not quite sure why we supply. Right, so this is now where we're going to have to think for a second, because for whatever reason we're supplying one model in the constructor and another in the executes. Now that's very strange. Now we can't fix the world, of course, but it is very strange that we're doing that. But well, there you are. So what we just need to do then is we'll leave it like that for now. The reason why is because sorry, I mean to say we will leave it like that for now because sorry, what I really wanted to do is to go for the other workflow. Right, so I think we will leave this really strange thing for now, because this transform is going to go. It's very, very strange what we're doing here. I mean, we're supplying some elements that we know up front in the call. Some others are coming here. We should really be using a context. All sorts of things are not right here. But what we need to do is to keep focus on what we're trying to achieve. And that's not what we're trying to achieve. Right, so now, for example, why are we the feature model? I think the problem is we're calling feature model for the FM for the feature model and also FM for the formatables model. So that's what's confusing here. Doesn't really matter. Let's keep focus. So what we really want is for this method here to just take the formatables model. Now then, the context will take the physical model, but it will no longer require the enabled not sure why our context is not liking it. Let's try to understand what's going on here. So the first thing we need is the element properties. That would explain it. LSP could give you some hints on this, couldn't it, really? So, and now problem is executes, which is probably alright. Okay, so now the problem is going to be that once you so we've just propagated from the top level chain over to the first workflow, which is the transforms workflow, we propagated the physical model. At some point, well, let's just do a quick compile and see how bad things are broken at the moment. Well, I can already see there's a problem here. And the problem will probably be that we don't need this guy. And we need a physical model. So hopefully... So where are we with the physical model? I don't think we'll be using the templates directory anymore. So tracer followed by the physical model. So I think what we need to do is to say this guy. Something like this. So now then, we are calling hopefully the right things. Seems to have a problem here. Ah, yes, that's correct. So what we really want to do is to unpack the physical model. No, so let's just do MMP, is probably enough here. So let's just say context, not physical model, but Metamodel Properties. So with the MMPs, we can now easily say, please give me those. Okay, so a lot of changes here, a bit confusing, but what we're trying to do now is we're trying to get rid of any reference to facet directories. I think we still have a few problems here. I don't recall that we've extracted the templates direct. Oh no, we did that. So the only problem is going to be the enable elements for archetype, I think, which we could probably start cracking now. I think enable elements. I thought we were using it here. Well, anyway, let's see what the compilation says. Won't take too long. So, because we changed the assistant, sadly, we have to recompile every single transform. Another reason why we should really not have this CD assistant class. To be honest, the assistant is slowly kind of being deprecated, as you can see. In the past, we used the assistant because we... Oh, there we go. Oh, link error. Interesting. Ah, that's interesting. Enable archetypes for elements in the context. So we still mentioned in the context. So first, let's fix the context. But we don't really want you to have that. Then let's see who's going to be attempting to use that. Presumably somebody must. Okay, good, nice compilation error. And it's the assistant, which is what we wanted a second ago. And what we need is very simple here to say, give us the MMPs, and then MMPs dot enabled archetype for elements, and that hopefully will be the end of that. Not quite. Interesting. Okay, two different places in the two different places in the assistant, it seems that we are using that property. Not really clear why we are doing this in a loop. Should probably just obtain it at the top. And there should be something like MMP dot enable archetype for right? Sounds sensible enough. There are a lot that needs to be refactored in these classes, really. As I said, this assistant class, I mean, it's just evolved. The objective of the assistant class was just to provide some services to the model text transforms, so that we didn't have too much logic in the templates. But then it kind of evolved to sort of an assortment of things. Really, what we want is, if something is used in the templates, we should really have an associated transform that puts the logical model or the physical model in the right shape for it, rather than having to do a last-minute transform inside of a template. Because at the end of the day, and then this is the bit that I think is kind of hard to get your head around. This took us a while, but the purpose of all these models is to code generate. So we just need to figure out at which level the representation should occur, but it has to be either logical or physical, because the idea is that by the time you get to text should just be the dumping of elements, of model elements over to a text to a file. It shouldn't really be any more work, because otherwise, if you start doing work whilst we're trying to stream to templates, it's very difficult to validate that work. So really, we made a big effort, concerted effort, to move all the work earlier. Right, as you can see here, this compiles quite nicely. So let's just get a latest code generator now, and have a look at the diff. Right, so this should be the removal of the facet properties, hopefully. So we'll probably just commit this, because I think, well, actually, let's just run the code generator to make sure that regenerating the models doesn't cause any problems. And now we should basically say something like text.cpp remove uses of containers. No, so use physical model in text in transforms. Use physical model directly in transforms. So that's cool. And now, if we unstash our stash and we recompile this, if we did our job correctly, hopefully, we should now have no uses of those types. This is one of the cool things about Git. You can just do this stashing and unstashing and moving around very quickly. Be even quicker, nicer if C++ was quicker. So we'll probably try to just finish the facet directors in this video. We're probably approaching an hour now. What we'll do as well is let's just have a look to see if we're not doing something similar in C#. No, but we'll try to get the same types. If there are types that are representing the same thing in both models, such as aspect properties, for example, probably try to do C# and then C++ and C#, just to right. So that is actually quite satisfying, I think. Seems like it's just going to work. Quite surprising. It's nice when these things happen. Right, so as you can see here, we can now very simply say remove facet directories in Formatables. And that is it. We've achieved our first type, removed our first type quite nicely. Everything worked according to plan for a change. And if I go back here, right. So as you can, so basically this is the point of this exercise now. As you can see, we're just going to basically rinse and repeat and do this. Let's have a look at project items. Don't recall project items. It's a bit worrying. What does project items do? So let's go back to our log. It's always good to keep track of these things. Project items. So what do we think project items is doing? I wonder. So this guy here is already in project. So if I just rg Project items on CPP. Yes. Quite a few mentions. Text.cpp. Formatables model. Model IO. Model. And project items expander. Here we are. So there is a project items expander. Oh, let's make sure it's not C#. It is C#. Okay, let's ignore that. And I think we don't really have any use for that in C++, so let's just kill it. See what happens. Half of the exercise is a little bit like this. Do something, see what is actually being used for. So let's just generate everything and then do the usual conversions. And just see what this project items is doing. I mean, I would not be surprised if it's doing absolutely nothing, because remember this, we're in the middle of many refactors. It's entirely possible there's things here that got added for some experiment or another, and then we forgot all about it, and then now we are realizing that it's no longer used. So I think we probably should tackle the ODB databases and ODB SQL name case next, because we've already done a bit of ODB. While we think about this one, let's move over to that. So ODB databases. Now, I'm pretty sure we've done something to do with databases recently. And what we found out was that we already had databases somewhere in the logical model. And then we just had a conversion of that into an ODB representation, I think. In fact, I wonder if we are even using this at the moment. Okay, that looks good. Let's just make sure the code generator is still generating fine. Good. So let's just do a text.cpp, remove project, remove unused attribute, project items. Good. Nice when you have easy ones. Let's have a look at ODB databases then. So for this we can use RG for this. But this time let's just go specifically to transforms perhaps, or formatables maybe. Let's just go specifically to formatables here, and then let's do an RG. What we want to know is anyone in formatables using ODB databases? Bingo, adapt. Oh, actually the adapter is using, but I think, I may be lying here, but I think we don't need this guy anymore. Because, well, let's gamble and see what happens really. I suspect, well, we know the adapter is going to mount, so let's go straight to the adapter. Databases. See, as you can see here, we're doing all the database stuff. Now, I think, pretty sure the ODB databases stuff was already converted somewhere. So what we're going to do is quite liberally delete a few things here and see what happens. I'm not entirely sure to ODB SQL case name yet, so we'll leave that for a second. So we just have to be careful here that we don't do too much in one go. So that's just the only one we're interested in. So if I just quickly do the usual generation, and let's just stage all of that. Now then, what happens if we try to run all tests? So hopefully what we're expecting to see now is that, sadly, because we're touching the model itself, it's everything in Formatables depends on it. Excuse me. Everything in Formatables depends on it, so every time we touch this, it just takes a while. As you can see, programming sometimes is not particularly exciting, really. It's more about meticulous, especially refactoring. Refactoring really tests your ability to concentrate for long periods of time. So everything seems to be okay. Some noises from downstairs. Let me just quickly stop for a second. Everything looks fine. So our theory was correct. It's nice when we have a few easy ones. Right, so as you can see here, it's all good. Text.cpp, remove unused ODB databases. Righty, this is going well. ODB SQL camel case name, I mean, I'm also going to go out on a limb and say that we don't use that. Although, probably we should RG it. We probably should RG it. Let's start with a small RG, I think. Yeah, it doesn't look like we're doing a lot to it. I think we're okay. So, what happens if we then delete it? And the usual conversions. Alrighty, so what we're going to see here, hopefully, of course, we should really go to the adapter and see what the adapter is saying about this, because clearly it's going to be doing something. You can see we're getting to a point where the adapter is almost not adapting anything, which is exactly what you want. Because our point is that we want to get rid of the Formatables model, so if it gets to a point where we are not doing any adaptation, that means we've finished the refactor. Right, while that's going, let's have a look at our Git, usual selection of the world. Right, so what we're doing for time, 1 hour and 3 minutes. So what I propose is probably that we wrap things up with this, because I think this is the last easy win. And then we move to the next batch of types. And these are going to be these guys here. These 3 guys, I think. And then finally we just have the helpers. So I should think that will be a nice ending to this video. Well, that's still going, the compilation. See if there's anything else here. So the name. The reason why we can't actually get rid of the formatables. Oh, we also have the aspect properties actually, so there's 4 of them. Let's just put a note on our. So let's just say something like ODB related types. Ah, interesting. Okay, we've done something wrong here. It's not a problem. Let's have a look at the JSON model. Ah, there we are. Sometimes we forget to do the things, and then it comes back to bite us. So I think this will work. So what do we do then? Remove text.cpp, remove unused conversion of SQL camel case. Is it really SQL camel case? rename case. Convinced. Camel case didn't sound right. Okay, so we recommit with the right name. Righty, so put this back where it was. Actually, we should probably start using the desktop. Oh, winner undo. No, see, never quite managed to use winner undo properly for some reason. Never takes me to where I was. So I was in the actually. So it's supposedly in Emacs we have this way of keeping configurations, and you can revert back to the previous configuration. I think eyebrows is sort of the desktop manager sort of thing for Emacs that I use here to change between areas. And I think eyebrows and winner somehow don't seem to play nicely with each other. Somehow. Probably should do a search for that. Okay, cool. So where are we then? So we managed to get rid of facet directories in a few properties of the model, of the formatables models, which is quite good. So we'll stop this video now, and what we'll do is we'll return for another one where we tackle a few more of these types. Probably the standards and the streaming properties, I think. Or maybe even the aspect properties, because aspect properties is the last of the big element properties other than helpers. Well, actually there's two of these really. Anyway, we have plenty of choices here, so we probably will just return to pick up these guys. Of course, we still have quite a few guys here in C#. So this is a bit of a long, drawn-out exercise. Anyway, thanks for watching.